in many ways now, we are seeing that the government's response to this pandemic has been a catastrophic communication disaster. Its response has been a failure on all fronts. But just talking about the communication element of the guidance that it has produced has been fundamentally unclear and fundamentally flip-flopping. 1 minute you can do one thing, the next day it's the complete opposite. So it began with the herd immunity dilemma, where essentially Patrick Vallance, the main scientific advisor to the government, intimated that we wouldn't completely try and contain the spread of the virus. We would try and protect vulnerable groups like older people and immunosuppressed people. But essentially, because in the vast majority of cases it will not be deadly, and because of the principle of herd immunity, where the more people that get the virus and become immune will then mean once a certain level of people achieve this immunity in the population, which it is believed to be around 60%, then that will be a massive protective barrier which would potentially eradicate the virus in Britain. And so it was believed when they came out and said this, essentially, that herd immunity was a strategy for the government. But then, immediately after that, there were widespread criticisms because when you look at the numbers, it would potentially mean that hundreds of thousands of older people would die. And that is completely unacceptable, of course. And so they were immediately criticised with that guidance. So Matt Hancock, a few days later, said herd immunity is not our strategy, and that in fact we are going to try and contain this virus, because essentially there's three ways we can contain it. One is if there was a vaccine, which there isn't, so that's out the window. Two, if enough people become immunised, then through getting the virus, then it will stop the contagious spread of it and it will eventually be eradicated. And three, if we use very draconian social distancing measures and have basically a massive lockdown for weeks potentially, then that will possibly stop the virus. But out of those three things, it was believed by many in Britain that they were choosing the herd immunity strategy, which was massively criticised. And then they came out and said, no, we're going for the containment strategy. So that was the first major unclear guidance. They were also unclear on whether people should go to pubs, restaurants and bars. They didn't legally mandate the closure initially, which meant that many restaurants and bars, etc., that did have pandemic closure insurance would not be able to claim because they weren't legally shut. Then, a few days later, they have legally forced the closure of bars, restaurants and pubs all across Britain. But they could have done that initially and not left those business owners in a terrible position where the government's advice was that people shouldn't go there, but it's not illegal if you do. And if you do shut them, because you won't be able to make any claims on the insurance if it is insured, then what will happen to your staff salaries? Another area that has been completely unclear now that we have a so-called lockdown, is that are workers supposed to go to work where they can't work from home, where the bosses have told them they can't work from home, but they're not technically key workers? There are millions of people that fall into that category, such as construction workers, many of which are not technically considered to be key workers, over a third of which are classed as self-employed. Many of them are bogus self-employed, where in reality, for all intents and purposes, they are employed, but they, for the purposes of the law, are not classed as employed because the employers want to exploit them in terms of they want to remove any requirements to pay holiday and sick pay and so forth, and pensions contributions. So they keep them self-employed when in reality they are employed, and these loopholes need to be closed. But basically they have left construction sites open, so, and yet they expect people to implement 2-metre social distancing measures. Well, how can you work on a construction site if you have to implement 2-metre social distancing measures? It's not reasonably possible to carry out the health and safety guidance now with these coronavirus measures and have sites open. And yet, if those workers don't go to work, over 1 million of them self-employed contractors, they will simply receive £94 a week. And so for them, they will have economic misery if they don't go to work. So another area of unclear guidance is, can you go to the park? Can you go and exercise? They flip-flopped on all these issues. One day they said, yes, you can go to the park. Yes, you can go and see your loved one still. And then now they're saying, well, no, it's a lockdown. Don't do that. Any loved ones that live apart would have to move in together and cohabit for the time being. So their whole communication strategy has been utterly, utterly shambolic. It really has. And we're seeing more and more now that the British government's whole response taken as a whole is completely inadequate and wrong. They have handled this in a complete mess.